So who's the person who's going to have to give up their coat and their cloak? Their coat is the person who's the poorest of the poor. Poorest of the poor. Poverty and indebtedness were endemic, rampant during Jesus' ministry. The accumulation of land and wealth among the already wealthy landowners created conditions of poverty in which the rest of the population lived. The creditor had to return the cloak every evening according to Jewish law. So at least they had something at night, right? And that went on and on until the debt was paid, if it was ever paid. So I want you to listen to these sayings again, keeping in mind what you have seen and heard. This is again from continuation in the Sermon on the Mount from Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 38 through 42. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Give to everyone who begs from you. Do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. How many times have you been admonished to turn the other cheek? Go the extra mile. Give your cloak. In other words, to give sacrificially. You should give sacrificially. These sayings have been weaponized into moralistic imperatives. Usually someone who's already on the downside of power is scolded to behave in a way that keeps them on the downside of power. Turn the other cheek. For centuries, it's been used, for millennia, it's been used to tell women in abusive relationships, you just have to take it. You have to turn the other cheek. Telling people of color, you need to stay in your place. Be humble. Turn the other cheek. Go the extra mile. That's been used too for centuries to justify shaming people, to go beyond what they should do physically, emotionally, even spiritually. Give your cloak. You should give sacrificially. I remember a story, I think it was Lester McAllister who told it, disciples historian, member of this church, now deceased. Lester told this story about a woman who worked in what was then called the missions building in Indianapolis. A single mother, this was the disciples' Mecca, okay? This is headquarter disciples. She's a single mother. She made very little money. Her supervisor learned eventually that at the end of the month, whatever money she had left, she gave away to the mission of the church. She emptied her account every month. Apparently, she'd been doing this for years. I am sure that someone, somewhere along the line, would use this story as a great example of sacrificial giving. But I think the church did this woman a disservice. And you may be also thinking of the widow who gives all she has. That story is also misinterpreted. I do think we need to be challenged to give sacrificially according to our context. It should be in ways that are appropriate to our context. For someone on minimum wage to pay 10% to a tithe to their religious community I think is wrong. Because 10% of very little is a lot more than 10% of someone who's making enough to more than get by. Christians have had and still have a tendency, oh boy, do we ever, to moralize, not theologize. One of our Old Testament professors way back when would say, don't moralize, theologize. And these saints, they completely flipped the script of accepted so-called moral behavior in the time of Jesus. The usual action of people to take when something bad happens is revenge, is retaliation. And we know that's deadly. We've seen how deadly that is. But Jesus says also, he's saying, don't give in, don't surrender and roll over. He's describing a different way, a way that turns the tables of power by giving people a way to claim their own power, their own agency, their dignity. Moralistic readings of these sayings admonish people to give up their power and their agency. And I wonder, who interprets them that way? The people who are on the upside of power. People with power over other people already. They want to keep it. They don't want to share it. In his book on compassion practice, which I teach here at the church periodically, Dr. Frank Rogers tells this story. Reverend James Lawson, a nonviolent activist with Dr. King, recounts an example of a dignified and disarming response during the Civil Rights Movement. Lawson was leaving a cafe in the rural South when a passing motorcyclist spat in his face and then parked in the parking lot across the street. Lawson wiped the spit off his face and with dignified nonchalance walked over to the cyclist and asked him for directions to the next town. Completely disarmed the motorcyclist, who gave him directions. And for those moments, the playing field was equal. There was mutuality. Maybe the motorcyclist didn't realize that in those moments, but the script was flipped. All these sayings instruct us, don't retaliate and don't give up your power. It's both. Choose the third way. Jesus offers empowered forms of action in which we refuse to be humiliated in the face of dehumanization. We claim our dignity, we seize the initiative, and we invite the aggressor into an appropriate mutual relationship. Is this hard to do? You bet. Especially if most of your life has been on the downside of power. That's hard to learn. Does it take practice? Absolutely. They are skills that have to be learned and practiced. Is it risky? Of course it is. This is the way of compassion, the way of love. This is the Jesus way. We know that the Jesus way is the risky way. And it is the way we choose. And so may each of you hear the invitation of Jesus to practice this way. And I mean practice. It takes more than just, it's great to come together and support and find a center on Sunday. There are other opportunities, additional opportunities to learn this way and the practices that support it. Take time to learn the skills that are needed to respond in love and not reactivity. And may all of us grow. May all of us grow to be disarming, empowered practitioners of the Jesus way. Amen.